Welcome to Coaching with Confidence and Care podcast, inspired by common topics that arise in coach training, mentoring, and supervision. I'm Dr. Lubida Samidze, the founder of Upthink Coaching. I'm an active coach trainer, mentor, and supervisor. If you're listening, you're likely on a journey to step into your fullest capacity as a coach, and I hope this podcast contributes to your journey. In this episode of Coaching with Confidence and Care, I'll talk about a very particular skill, the skill that I call global listening. Let me provide some background, as I know that among the listeners of this podcast, we don't only have coaches or coaches in training. We also have aspiring coaches, leaders who use a coaching approach with their teams, people who are interested in professional development and non-directive style of communication. I'm sure you all heard about active listening as one of the core coaching competencies. It seems straightforward, but let's unpack it a little bit. Active listening is not one type of behavior. It consists of a few different behaviors that can provide evidence that a coach is truly tuned in to their client. Active listening can also show up at varying levels of depth, depending on how far the coach takes it. Active listening at earlier stages of coaching is busier, for the lack of a better word, and it gets more spacious as your coaching mastery grows. It evolves, and as you progress in your coaching skills, you're going to show more diverse behaviors within the skill, more variety in the ways you demonstrate active listening. For example, if newer coaches most often use paraphrasing, reconfirming, exploring particular words with clients to demonstrate active listening, then coaches at more advanced levels build on these skills and expand their listening repertoire by adding skills like exploring emotions, using silence, and so on. Something that I always notice as a mentor coach while listening to session recordings and observing live sessions is that coaches who transition to the next level of their mastery are really good at catching the finer details in what their clients share. That is, picking specific words, picking specific intonations, maybe even picking specific metaphors in their client's story, or summarizing and reflecting back when a client lists some events or action steps. Newer coaches are really good at catching and responding to this factual information, these little signals, and this is a great skill to have, don't get me wrong. We train them to do that. However, when this skill is overused, these listening habits can become a limitation, especially when your client goes into a long story. Maybe they have lots to say about their situation. I'm sure many of you have had a client who launches into a 15-minute monologue the moment they walk in, or once you ask them a question. Some clients like to talk, and this is wonderful because that could mean you are really good at creating a safe space for them to talk, and you can use silence and let them take center stage. At the same time, I know that newer coaches may be quite overwhelmed by the amount of input that they are receiving from a client, especially when it's an endless stream. They are receiving a story which may be complex and can have 2 or 3 different storylines. If the story is emotional, there may be a lot of epithets, figurative expressions, idioms, metaphors, plot twists, some especially meaningful words that may trigger attention. And when it becomes too much, a coach starts to think, okay, so when they stop, what do I need to explore with them? Where do I go? I've heard a lot of content and I potentially could explore so many different paths. So what is the best direction? This is when the skill of detailed listening doesn't serve you because you may start to get lost in content. This is when I suggest that coaches add a change of perspective to their active listening skill set and demonstrate what I call global listening. It's not about the focus on specific words and details of the landscape, but focus on the big picture. An extreme that I invite you to avoid here is over-analyzing clients' words. When a coach is eager to uncover deeper insights, they might overanalyze the client's language, deconstructing it for hidden meanings that might not even be there. This can interrupt the natural flow of the conversation and create a sense of disconnection or over-complexity where both coach and client may feel lost. Overanalyzing can happen when a coach hyper-focuses on dissecting metaphors, specific words, or repeated phrases, sometimes projecting meanings that the client did not intend. Analysis is valuable, but it shouldn't come at the expense of following the client's pace and focus. It can help you support the client in putting things together to understand their situation more holistically, seeing how everything fits into their broader narrative and goals. Sometimes the challenge is that if a coach hears a word that strongly resonates with them, they start to make assumptions about what is holding the client back. And I've witnessed that many times in my mentorings. A client says a loaded word or phrase, say imposter syndrome or the word fear earlier in a coaching session. Then they continue the story and do not go back to that again. And they talk about some other feelings as well. The story evolves and other events and feelings take the center stage. But coaches may still remember those specific words because then they just made an assumption that they've heard the most important word, the key word that the client had to say. And since they heard it, they are not quite present any longer. They miss some other important cues and patterns and elements of the story because they are waiting for their turn to talk so that they could ask about that fear or about that imposter syndrome or about something else that caught their attention. Now imagine that listening is like walking through a forest. You notice different trails. Hear the rustling of leaves. Maybe you catch glimpses of birds flitting by. Here's a butterfly dancing in the air, and here's bright clusters of cranberries or blackberries. There's a gentle murmur of a stream, and then you see tracks leading somewhere unknown, and faint animal sounds in the distance. Could they be dangerous? The forest is full of details. Everything seems enticing and worthy of attention, making it hard to decide where to focus. Questions might start popping into your mind. What is the most meaningful part of this? Which path should we follow? What might spark the greatest insight for my client? When you notice yourself getting lost in all these details, I invite you to experiment and change your perspective so that you see the forest, not the trees. One of the easiest ways for me personally to invite that shift in attention is to physically lean backwards and create more space between me and my client, between me and the screen, between me and the client's story, and keep listening to the story with more spaciousness. I'm listening for the big picture now. I'm paying attention to the bold strokes that stand out to me. Is there a theme? Is there a repeating pattern? Is there a strong feeling? Is there a specific narrative that the client is trying to convey with their story? Oftentimes, when I invite my mentees or coaching students to experiment with changing the quality of their listening through this embodiment practice, they report feeling more grounded because they don't get caught up in all these details and they try to focus on the big picture with the client. Very often, that helps the client too, because the client themselves may get overwhelmed with the story and all those details that are happening in their life and pull them away from its core message. So this is the first part of global listening to me. Listening from a greater perspective, putting yourself and shifting yourself to a vantage point where you can hear the whole story and see the full forest. Another part is developing an ability to listen to what's not said. Newer coaches mostly focus on what has been said. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. These are all the wonderful skills that we train our coaches to develop. And at the same time, we need to see when that becomes a limitation, right? If all we've got is a hammer everything starts to look like a nail. And when we work with unique personalities and unique situations, contexts, and goals of our clients, we really cannot have this one-size-fits-all approach. And we need to grow our capacity to demonstrate each coaching competency in its breadth and depth. So, as you progress in your coaching mastery, you may start to focus on developing listening to what is not said, and that is about noticing and responding to what's missing. For example, avoided topics, hesitations, or shifts in tone, which would require your high sensitivity to gaps, omissions, or avoidance in the client's narrative. Clients may sometimes avoid certain topics because they are unaware of them, feel uncertain, or afraid to confront them or even acknowledge them. The key point here is really to hear what's not being said and not make assumptions about what is not being said. For example, a client might speak extensively about the technical challenges of a project, but never mention how they feel about their role as a leader. More advanced coaches may attune to those omissions and gently invite the client to explore them without making the client feel pushed. When a client says something like, "We are behind schedule and I'm trying to fix the issues with my team, it's been hectic but I'm managing," instead of directly taking your client into action and asking them, "What can help you manage better?" When you listen to what is not said, you could say something like, "I notice you haven't mentioned how you feel about managing through this hectic period. What is your internal experience like?" By addressing the unspoken aspect, you could invite the client to explore deeper layers of their reality, creating space for greater self-awareness and resolution. We often have these conversations with coaches who are training to deliver sessions at more advanced level and prepare for their PCC credential with the ICF, for example. They're asked to demonstrate coaching at awareness level. And we tell them, okay, you won't just do transactional coaching that is about fixing a problem or brainstorming more ways of doing the task that the client needs to take. It's not just about an action plan. First, you explore the awareness level and the who of the client, and only then you help them use this new awareness to design new steps. And our coaches in training often say, but what if they bring just very, very action-oriented session goals? They say, I want to have a plan, I want to have a strategy, and they don't bring those inner topics to sessions. Well, maybe not many clients will, but we can partner with them and start with the outer level, use our presence, active listening, contracting skills to see what is happening with the whole client, to hear what is said or not said, to explore those deeper levels with them. Global listening is about hearing the big picture, the context, underlying systems, unspoken dynamics, the interconnectedness of the client's story. I always say that coaching mindset is primary. And what you do as a coach, for example, how you show active listening, is the result of this mindset. I believe there is one quality that is important to develop to master global listening, and it is developing your inner capacity as coaches to hold space for complexity, allowing the client's story to unfold fully and see what their broader narrative includes, what different layers there are, and how they interact. Global listening also captures recurring patterns that cross themes, even when a client doesn't explicitly connect them. Maybe they are repeating ideas or concerns about control, trust, growth, confidence, or systemic influences, and that can be about external systems influencing the client, say their family, workplace, organizational culture, expectations of other people, and how the client operates within all these systems. Another thing you can try to learn is to hear the energy of a story. And by energy of the story, I mean the client's energy and flow and emotional undertones across their narrative. In order to hear the energy of the story, my belief is that it helps when coaches can attune to their own energy. Let me offer you some ideas so that you could practice and further enhance your global listening skills. Learn more about and practice system thinking. Aim to understand how clients operate, within interconnected systems. For example, their family, work, society. Use meta-reflections. After sessions, reflect on how you connected the dots across what the client shared. What did you notice about the whole that the client might not see yet? Work on developing narrative awareness. Pay attention to the flow of the client's story and their bold strokes. What are the transitions, recurring themes, or shifts in energy? Balance global and detailed listening. Use detailed listening to gather important data points and step back periodically to consider how these details form the big picture. When you want to explore with your clients, don't only ask them about little details, but also ask expansive questions like, what are the common themes right here? What's the largest story you see emerging? For example, a client is sharing a story about, say, how they have been feeling frustrated at work lately. And they say something like, I'm always fixing problems my team should handle, and I'm constantly exhausted at home. When you use detailed listening, you might choose to focus on the words frustrated, exhausted, asking questions about specific work challenges or family responsibilities. An alternative approach would be to synthesize and say something like, it sounds like you are carrying a heavy load, both at work and at home. I wonder if there's a pattern in the roles you are taking on across different areas of your life. What is your perspective? That's all I wanted to share today with you. The key message is for you not to cancel detailed listening and only use global listening, but to add global listening to your detailed listening skills to show variety and range of this competency. By mastering global listening, you can navigate client narratives with greater depth and agility, offering insights that help your client see the full complexity of their situation. This skill will strengthen your ability to hold space for transformational conversations. At the end of the day, there's no recipe for coaching, and you'll be dancing in the moment with each of your clients. Developing a breadth and depth of skills will help you make each dance flow smoothly, no matter the tempo or steps your client brings to the session. If you have strategies that work for you, I'd be excited to hear about them, so don't hesitate to get in touch. If this is something that you think is relevant to coaches like you, please share on your social media and feel free to tag me on LinkedIn. You can also send in your questions or topics that you'd like covered in future episodes. If you look for ongoing professional development as a coach, go to Upthink Coaching website to explore our coach training program for beginner and advanced coaches, as well as mentor coaching and supervision. www.upthinkcoachingaltogether.com. Thanks for listening to this episode. Next time, we'll talk about creating a fluid and smooth coaching session flow. Don't miss it.